Yeah, um, politics together and being solution oriented, bottom up, as decentralized as possible. The topic we have today is preparing for climate extremes. Of course, extreme heat, extreme floods, extreme cyclones, but some other extremes as well. We'll see. And what are the lessons that we have for adaptation from South Asia? And Shilpi would be introducing that. I wanted to make a couple of remarks on at a regional level and especially around lessons on adaptation in South Asia. And one lesson which is very clearly emerging is that adaptation need to directly address high risk at lower level of global and therefore regional warnings. So risks are going up, and the warnings are still remain at a lower level. The second regional lesson, it seems, is that adaptation needs to address rising impact, increasing regional differences in South Asia. So though South Asia is a region, but the impact has regional differences, and it's quite uneven, and we need to keep that in mind, both in terms of adaptation and its impact. The third that we found in the region is that adaptation needs to address massive heat extremes in South Asia, global south. And we may directly address it as heat extreme or heat extreme, sadly, in combination with cyclone, combination with floods, and combination of with many other challenges as well. So that's the third thing to keep in mind while we open this. And fourth is Shibaji Bhai will also be addressing that, and that is social vulnerability still is the key to effective adaptation measures in South Asia. The more and sooner and faster we address social vulnerability, more and sooner and better we are likely to have the results of adaptation. So these being four key observations that I wanted to share from not only the work that Shilpi is about to share with us, but also from the other work that we have been part of directly as ourselves or part of other people's work looking at. So these are the four areas. The way we are going to do is we look at the co-location of hazards with Shilpi, who is a research fellow at Institute of Development Studies and leads some of the most cutting edge work on adaptation in the region. So she will introduce the project. And then we have very fresh, original, and energetic Megha, who's going to talk from the ground, what's happening on the ground in terms of living with floods and droughts, and also the insights that's coming out from people's experience. And she'll be joined by Vinita, who is also a research officer at IDS and has been part of this work. We have a visual work, which is Shibajiba is going to share with us, who is with the National Institute of Technology at Durgapur, and how not only what we listen and read and speak and count, but also what we see, adaptation measures. And not only how we see, the people who are adapting themselves see that more importantly, and that's something that he's going to share. We have Chaitra, who's just joined us. Thank you. And will be joined by Krishna Achyutrao, both of them part of the very eminent atmospheric sciences department of Indian Institute of Technology. Some of the best research on climate and climate change and the measures to address that are coming from there. So they are going to tell us about the changing landscape of extreme events and their causes. And that's something very important to put the adaptation measures in perspective. Then we have Saiful Alam Saab, who would be joining us. I didn't see the name. He must be joining us very soon. And it's going to talk about water and flood extremes and mainly lessons on local adaptation. and he's with BUET, one of the premier and one of the first universities addressing engineering and technology together. And then we have Saqib Haq, the coordinator from Climate Finance Program at ECAD. And he's going to share with us Climate Extremes, Lessons for Adaptation Finance from South Asia. That what do we know, where money is working, where it is not, and where it's working, how is it working, so that we can finance solutions that come. We'll have question answers after that. Shilpi and I will do closing remarks in terms of both try to sum up, but also where all this is going in terms of adaptation lessons around climate extremes. So that's today's schedule. We will be closing at 5 sharp, and I have requested panel members to be precise and punctual, both in starting but also in finishing. And I again welcome all the participants. So many familiar names, and I feel like mentioning, but I will not in the interest of time. But please do participate and raise, either write your questions in the chat box or raise the issues and questions once we have finished with the presentations. I will make a small break in between to see if there is a burning question just after Shibaji Bhai finishes. And then we'll have, of course, the whole thing opened again. Thank you very much. And now to you, Shilpi. Please tell us about co-located hazards and challenges for development based on the work that you are doing on ADAPT. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mihir. Thank you for the introduction. While it's a pleasure to be here, of course, and in familiar settings. So thanks so much to ICAD and also AIDMI for actually leading and coordinating this session and organizing all of this. Our presentation today focuses on the findings from an ongoing project, Anticipate, which Mihir has just mentioned. This project started in 2020, but the real work really started in 2022. Because of the pandemic, a lot of our work was suspended. From 2022 onwards, March 2022 onwards, we've been doing field work in North Gujarat and also in Kutch. And so we'll be sharing some of the findings from there. The project is funded by the British Academy, and it's a collaboration between the Institute of Development Studies in the UK, where I'm based, the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, University of Right, and All India Disaster Management Institute in India. So just in terms of the ideation and setting the background, the ideation of this project is firmly located in the rapid rise of extreme weather events across the world. These events also make it amply clear that we are now entering a phase of radical climatic uncertainty, where there is a clear break from the past. So the past can no longer guide what the future holds. So we are seeing new patterns of events, new patterns of variability. For example, the challenge of extreme rainfall in historically drought-prone areas is one example, but it's not just the challenge of unprecedented or unknown events. It's also the issue of extreme or the normal becoming extreme. So also the known events are becoming highly variable. One quick example would be the heat wave from last year, March 2022, which was witnessed in South Asia, a historic heat wave, and also one of the warmest March months witnessed in almost 122 years. So as all of us from South Asia, we know that heat wave is not something which is uncommon in many ways, but the intensity of it and the incidence of it in the month of March was totally unprecedented and unexpected. While we're also witnessing, what we're also witnessing is a co-occurrence of multiple extreme events, which are increasingly becoming co-located by way of either being closely timed, such as droughts, and then floods follow, or co-occurring. So droughts co-occurring with heat waves or wildfires, what we see in Europe here. This is what we've called co-located hazards. And this is a term that is coined by my colleague Krishna, who will be speaking about this in a bit. These clearly demonstrate a break from the past in terms of changes in frequency, intensity, impact, and scale. In Anticipate project, our objective is to examine how different actors are experiencing and preparing for these co-located hazards, and how can we then co-produce preparedness with marginal communities who are really on the front line of climate change and also on the front line of these extremes, totally unprepared and unanticipated events that are unfolding in some of the most vulnerable, with some of the most vulnerable places across the globe. Our focus for the project has been on the state of Gujarat, and we have, as I said previously, we've been working in North Gujarat, very close to the border with Rajasthan. Now, Gujarat is one of the most drought-prone states in the country and has experienced erratic pattern of rainfall for many decades. So, local people refer to the cyclical nature of droughts, for instance. However, floods, which were usually black swan events, are increasingly becoming the new normal. So floods have become more and more intense, as well as are occurring more frequently. And I think Krishna and Chaitra will also touch upon it, how models are also showing this increased wetness in the region, and our own social science work that has been happening with local communities there also demonstrates this. While local people may be attuned to some form of climate variability, especially related to scarcity and droughts, but the rapid rise of water extremes, floods and droughts, and high climatic variability has constrained their traditional responses, especially when wider forces in the political economy, be it industrialization, agrarian transition, migration, or land use change, also limit their adaptive capacity. In Anticipate, in particular, we are looking at the intersection of these hydrological extremes, droughts and floods, with some of these wider forces. We draw on a range of methods from the social sciences, the visual and design methods, and atmospheric modeling. All of these will be covered in the presentations today. Our approach is strongly informed by the voices and concerns that emerge from the field, even if they are not in tandem with the broader debates that the project originally sought to speak to. I think this is key to the Anticipate project because we went in with the understanding of floods and droughts, and we were very event focused. But what our ethnographic research for the last 18 months has shown that we also need to critically look at the construction of extremes, and we will talk about it in our presentations. We very much locate our work within the literature on climate, compound climate extremes, which is emerging in the climate sciences, but also take a critical social science perspective, a bottom-up view on how these extremes get shaped on the ground. We are thus particularly interested in the framing of the hazard, when and for whom it becomes extreme and why. And in this context, how should we think about preparedness? And with that, I will hand over to my colleagues Megha and Vinita, who will take you to the field in Gujarat and our experiences there. Thank you. Over to you, Megha and Vinita.
Thank you, Shilpi. Very, very succinct, but obviously a whole area to look at more carefully. And we have very specific examples from Gujarat, north of Gujarat, with Megha and Vinita. Please.
Thank you so much, Shilpi and Mihir bhai. So in our field research, community slide, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
You see the slide?
Yes. In our recent field visits, community mentioned that they have experienced the drought once in past 2.5 decades, while they are experiencing floods more often for like 3 to 4 times in past 2 decades. They define the drought as scarcity of water, increased cost of the agricultural inputs and animal husbandry inputs. So due to the deficit of rains. And for the flood, they defined it as the prolonged waterlogging in their houses and fields due to heavy rainfall. While interacting with community, they oftenly mention that these extremes are one of the events, but due to the technologies like bore wells and canals where water is very much available to them, also the floods are occurring due to some heavy rainfalls within the area or area which are nearer to the Gujarat, we also mentioned here the Rajasthan rainfalls. So due to these aspects, they are facing the challenges with floods, but they are also mentioning it as one of the event, while they also mention that there are in between extremes that are happening on the field with them, and that they are mentioning it as green drought. They noted green drought causes by the excessive and continuous rainfall during the monsoon season, and which likely to result in a crop failure during the monsoon. However, the green drought is not that hazards as a conventional drought, as it allows them to cultivate during the other seasons like winter and summer. Next slide, please. On the forecast part, as we already see that variabilities are increasing, community are now relying in more than one methods. So there are few methods that they are rely on for forecasting. Per se, in traditional methods, they are observing the flowering pattern on the plants. They also observe the movements of cattle and birds, wind direction, cloud formation, and etc. But within this uncertainty periods, it seems like traditional methods are not working as apt as the local indigenous weather forecasting available as of now. This information they are getting in the sense where and it's helpful for them to prepare in a certain way for these uncertainties. However, the youth also rely on IMD's data available to them with WhatsApp messages or in terms of alert through text messaging and everything. Yet we found that their belief are certainly associated with the traditional methods is very strong in our research area. And they also prepare well in advance on that aspects. Shift in information dissemination for weather changes of the impact of the forecast change is to be needed. Next slide. On the preparedness, community sees is at two levels, long term as well as short term. And in shorter range, they preparing themselves as a seasonal preparedness. They prepare for a monsoon, for unseasonal rain, and etc. Things. For a longer preparedness, they see for the extreme events where they construct their houses at a higher altitude. They construct animals shelters and other constructional issues. They also sees that animal husbandry is now more economically stable aspect for them. We will cover that aspect in later in the PPT. So these are the preparedness they do on a shorter and longer period in terms of their resource availability. As we gear up to confront this extreme situation, several additional emerging challenges are on way of us. My colleague Vinita will explain on it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Megha. So like Megha and Shilpi have said, we went in thinking about extremes as droughts and floods, but Megha's work in the field has made us think about that a little more. And one of those additional dimensions we're seeing is heat waves. Again, heat waves is not something that's an uncommon occurrence, but the intensity and the timing of the heat waves is what is affecting communities a lot more now. From Megha's work in the field, women have recalled that usually they are able to work in the fields until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon before they take a break. But now they are not able to work beyond 11:30, 12. During that time of heat waves, they're not able to work beyond mid-morning, which is another dimension of co-location. Second is something that villagers in our research area have been mentioning, which is something they call dual seasonality, where they've noticed very cold early mornings, extremely hot afternoons, and then rains in the evening and stormy weather. Again, this adds another challenge for them in order to predict, prepare. This affects, many livelihoods that are linked to optimal weather conditions. And finally, villagers usually are accustomed to unseasonal rains in the month of February and March. But now they're experiencing at least 1 or 2 occurrences of unexpected rain every month. Again, this is something that affects harvest, it causes crop losses, and this is another thing that people are struggling to predict and prepare for. Slide, please. So from our work in the field so far, I'd like to outline a few ways forward and things widely to think about from a policy perspective. One is landless farmers work under something called a bhag system, which is where those that are landless work on landowners' farms and they get a portion of the crop. However, even though this is not an uncommon practice, those who are part of this system are quite disadvantaged. They don't have access to disaster relief compensation. They're forced to rent water for irrigation from larger landowners. This is widening the gap between those that are landless and landowners, and this is exacerbating inequalities. Compensatory measures for crop losses, irrespective of whether you are a landowner or you are working in the bhag system, is something that is being triggered arbitrarily without taking into account the size of the land ownership status, or local climate uncertainties. Again, what does an extreme mean for whom is something very important here, because one definition of an extreme is not sufficing for those in these areas and with the current climate uncertainties. Third is positioning women's perspective in order to build preparedness or responses to extreme weather events is absolutely essential, because their experiences are often invisible and undocumented. Their role as contributors to everyday household climate adaptation measures is vital, and their experiences need to form a part of future adaptation strategies. And finally, all of these increasing uncertainties and rapidly changing climate patterns require a more community-focused approach in order to assess visible and invisible damages and prepare better. Thank you.
Thank you. Very important to have specific details from the ground. Megha and Vinita, thank you so much. And now we will go to look at some other specific details from the ground with Shivaji Bhai, if you would.
Yeah.
And we'll see
Thank
very
you.
specific visual material. Thanks.
Yes, thanks, Mihbai. It's and Shilpi and Vinita and Megha. I have an unstable connection and so therefore unable to put the video on. I hope you understand. So as we go to COP28, I think it is our duty to inform the stakeholders gathering in Dubai about the extreme events which are occurring in numerous regions of Bangladesh and India and elsewhere in the world. And as Shilpi and you also pointed out, we have been partnering with ICAD researchers led by Dr. Salimul Haq for our visual methods since 2019, pre-COVID times on the transformative patches. So the community-based and community-led visual methods are our collaborative endeavor to gain a transdisciplinary lens from the community's eyes. We look forward to our partners in Bangladesh on the extremes. And if you can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So Megha will get into the findings, but in order to introduce our findings, the visual tools that we have been using are for surfacing tacit and subjugated knowledge, and it has been an integral part of our research queries um, to climate extremes. And this short presentation attempts to understand and reflect why and how a wide variety of visuals were selected in Anticipate to unpack multi-dimensional evolving themes across a wide variety of species within our research village, ranging from, as uh, uh, Megha and Vinita said, ranging from hidden to visible, but not always fully understood. Throughout, we have been informed by our Brighton University Design Science colleagues and our IIT colleagues, Professor Krishna Achyuta Rao, who is also a lead author of the IPCC, Mihir Bhai and Shilpi, about overarching issues with which our communities are grappling with and the future forecasting scenarios. So the Anticipate project has used a mixture of deliberately employed facilitation through visual tools by the social and design researchers to complement other investigations. Here we are going to talk about photo elicitation engaged documentary photography, which Megha, my colleague who's going to come in next, and say more about it. Through this engaged documentary photography, she had been, working in the village for 1 full year, understanding with the communities. So these are being used as need-based methods due to time and situational considerations, as the project lost considerable amount of time due to COVID. So by what we did was, by letting go of our research control, it was itself, and we thought it was itself an emancipatory approach where the voices and the agency give the local people a sense of stating their beliefs and perceptions freely of their own logical legacy of contending with unfolding uncertainties imbibed in their traditions and their uh, landscapes. Next slide, please. So our lessons shaped from the community has shaped our research. We started with embedding our tools to facilitate the voices of community, especially our women. We found that one element was common, their unending stream, with Vinita was alluding to their unending stream of their daily activities, which remain unpaid and hidden. This became great entry points to start a conversation and evoke a range of responses. Embracing of Embracing of this co-produced visual methods by the community provided us with an intimate understanding of how women contain and engage with different aspects of leading up to the extremes, during the extremes, and while picking up the broken pieces. And they had very little time, and we decided to take the help of photo elicitation, and which lens, combined lens from the researcher and community's perspective. I will now hand over to my colleague Megha for the findings from the visual methods. Thank you so
Megha,
much.
please. Thank you, Shivaji bhai. Megha.
Thank you so much. So as Shivaji mentioned that during visual methods, we have tried different methods, keeping in mind the availability of community members and the need of the project and time of duty of the project. During the photo elicitation, we have shown some of the picture to the community members and gathered their perspectives on the photos in the range of co-located hazards, forecast, and preparedness. Next slides, please. Thank you. So climate extremes are affecting the farming practices very much. and all the community members are one or another way associated with the farming agricultural practices. So through these pictures, I think it shows that on the left side first picture, like they are preparing for the delayed rain patterns, like they are share, and they are cultivating the some part of land before the rains, and they wait for the rains to cultivate in the other part of the rains. However, with the continuous and excessive rainfalls during the monsoon, the crops are uh, going to be failed due to the pattern of the soil, the waterlogging capacity of the soils, and etc. reason. But perhaps all this uncertainty when the crops are readily to harvest in the winter season, then the unseasonal rains again challenging for them to harvest those uh, crops. Also, when the crop reaches to the market, it also very challenging for them uh, to sell it at a proper price, or to certainly store that harvested crop in a particular environment. So yes, due to all these uncertainties, many farmers are shifted towards the cash crop as an adaptation. But poor market connection, rising input costs, and concurrent crop failures due to this climate uncertainty throughout the year have prompted them uh, to to different to adopt different livelihood options as a stable economic input. Uh, Next slide. So in terms of to gain the stable economic opportunity, more or less all the communities, uh, including traditional pastoralists to all the other community in the village, shifted towards the animal husbandry, and they see animal husbandry as the most prepared, most reliable preparedness adaptation, as a dairy cooperative are assisting them with proper loans, providing them the cattle feeds and grain at a subsidiary rate. They also provide them veterinary care and fair prices for milk. Due to all these aspect, community rely on the um, uh, animal husbandry more often. However, the young generation is increasingly transitioning to the urban areas in search of the more skilled and less labor intensive opportunities, moving away from both agriculture and livestock keeping in the village. Next slide. Uh, Within all these uncertainties of delayed rain, excessive rains, and unseasonal rains, and all such aspects, um, the generation who is still in the village rely on the local um, indigenous forecasters forecasting for preparedness. Uh, they also says that in times of the floods and the extreme events, the community places increased reliance on the WhatsApp message and early warnings from the government authorities. However, their preparedness primarily depends on the resources available for them in short-term and long-term periods. Next slides. Thank you. So as Vinita also mentioned about the hidden work associated with women, amidst all this uncertainty, women still view agriculture as a means of ensuring food security for the family as well as for the livestock they are keeping. They plays very crucial role in preparing against all this uncertainty at seasonal level to the long term level. They also contribute very excessively with all the livelihood opportunities available within the village by doing milk and co-produce of milk products. But I think almost every time this preparedness against unexpected rains, excessive rainfalls and extreme weather conditions, which are taking place in the village area, women demands on the women are more increasingly demanded by the other community members. They women are uh, under the excessive work pressure uh, uh, for their routine work as well as all the demands put by the extreme uncertainties. So all these uncertainties puts extra efforts on the shoulder of the women, and it is the hidden responsibility that women are carrying with ourselves. I over to you, Shibaji, to sum up this findings.
Thank you, Megha. Thank you. Shivaji bhai, please, can you sum up?
Yeah. Thanks, Megha. It's a result of 1 year of constantly staying with the communities, and all the pictures that you were seeing has been, is a collaborative effort with the communities and the narratives that she spoke of. So we hope our findings will inform the South Asia Resilience Hub on gender inequality, about the unpaid and the hidden labor of women, which um, we did by employing a gender lens, and food, agriculture, and water. That is one of the uh, big bigger, I would say, overarching issue in the COP that's going to come, and most of our findings will allude to this. And as a crosscut to the frontline communities who are facing a barrage of this unprecedented weather extremes, and which will only intensify in the future. Thanks, Meanwhile. Thank you.
Thank you, Shivaji bhai, and it's good to see the power of visual representation, not only by us, but others. Shilpi, you want to add some?
Just two quick points here, if we have the time. Something that didn't wasn't mentioned and alluded to, I think, in the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that our approach has been really embedded, and we reversed the gaze in many ways. So we started with Photo Voice, which is really about training women, and our focus was on gender initially, but as the presentation showed, it's been intersectional. So women, young women, as well as men. So we have like photo stories across the intersection. But I wanted to make a point about extractive methods. We realized soon after we did 2 orientations on Photo Voice in the village last year in October 2022 and November 2022. But we realized that it wasn't being taken up, which was also a finding for us, because we've successfully, Shibaji and other colleagues, have been able to deploy Photo Voice as a very successful tool to capture these lived realities around climate change. But in this particular village, there was a challenge, and that was precisely because women didn't have the time. That's what they said. We don't have the time. Our daily activities of gathering fodder. Last year, there were unseasonal rains again towards the end of September when we were doing fieldwork. And they said that because of lack of fodder now, because fodder is gone, we have to travel quite a few kilometers to get fodder for our cattle. And therefore, we don't have the time to participate in, this kind of embedded Photo Voice activity. And therefore, we started Photo Elicitation, which is really about understanding what's happening in the village. So it doesn't begin with the lens of flood and droughts, but really the daily stream of unending activities in every season. So we've created something called the Seasonality Tracker, which has tracked the activities in the village for over 18 months now through visuals. So I just wanted to make those quick 2 points.
Thank you. Seasonality Tracker. Yes, that's a contribution we should talk during the question answers. I request Chaitra and Krishnaji to present your work on extreme events and their causes, how the landscape is changing. Let me welcome you both, and floor is yours.
Thank you.
Chaitra, should I share the presentation file?
I can share. I hope the screen is visible to everyone.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay. So hello everyone, good evening. So today Professor Krishna and myself will be presenting on this topic, changing the landscape of extreme events and their causes. So in the recent years, we have seen a notable increase in extreme weather events around the world, which can be attributed to global warming, as highlighted in the 6th assessment report of IPCC. So we are quite certain that human activities are responsible for extreme temperature changes we have been witnessing. But when it comes to the extreme precipitation events, our level of confidence is not as high. One reason is because of the natural variability or natural factors that can also play a significant role in influencing these type of events. So the figure here, which is this is from IPCC. This figure is sort of a world map which is represented with hexagons. So here green color indicate an increase in extreme precipitation, where you see 3 dots indicate high confidence that human activities are one of the major factor behind the changes in extreme precipitation. So if you consider this region, South Asia or SAS, we can see that the precipitation has increased in this region, but to attribute this to human activities, we have a low confidence due to limited number of studies in this region. So that the IPCC has assigned a low confidence in this region. So today we are going to analyze 2 of the extreme precipitation indices. The first one is the R95 PTOT, which is the total precipitation due to very wet days. R95 PTOT is a way of measuring extremely heavy rain events. Like when we have high values of R95 PTOT, which indicate really heavy rainfall, which can lead to flooding. The other index is the CDD, which is a consecutive dry days. CDD is a representation of longest dry spell. So high values of CDD is an indicator of long periods without any rain that can lead to droughts or even water shortages. So here I'm going to give an idea about how the extreme precipitation is distributed over the country and how it has changed over the past 30 years or so. So you can see that intense extreme rainfall is more common along the west coast, followed by this region in northeast and some central Indian regions. But in the last 30 plus years or so, you can see how the precipitation has changed over the country. There is a significant increase along the west coast, and you can see in the Gujarat region, the precipitation has increased significantly these years. And then in contrast to that, over the northeastern region, there is a strong decrease in rainfall. But when it comes to dry spell, in general, we experiences high values of dry spell in the northwestern parts, including Gujarat, Rajasthan, and regions of Tamil Nadu. And if you look at the change in the last recent decades, there has been a significant decrease in the number of dry spell over the Gujarat region. So now I'll give an example of how a natural mode of variability, which is called ENSO, is affecting the extreme precipitation over India. ENSO is the El Nino Southern Oscillation, which is a mode of natural variability present in the Pacific Ocean, and it has 2 phases called El Nino and La Nina. So during the El Nino phase, you can see that here in the diagram, blue color indicate an increase and the red color indicate a decrease. And during El Nino years, we experience decreased rainfall and an increased number of dry days over this region. And whereas during the La Nina years, the situation is the opposite, where we experience excess rainfall in this region, and the dry days have decreased significantly during the La Nina years. So currently we are in the El Nino phase of ENSO, but in the last 3+ years we were in the La Nina phase. Now here you can see how the individual forces such as aerosols, greenhouse gases, and natural forces are affecting the extreme precipitation. All forcing is a combination of aerosols, greenhouse gases, and natural forcing. So here actually we are focusing on aerosols and greenhouse gases here. You can see that aerosols results in a decreasing extreme rain and an increase in the CDD over this region, whereas greenhouse gas is doing the opposite, where it increases the extreme rainfall and decreases the dry days over this region. And you can also see that the natural forcing is also playing a role in this region. So, so we have seen that multiple things that cause extreme rainfall. One is the El Nino, La Nino, and other things are greenhouse gases and aerosols. So these are all things, or all these are all these are all sources of uncertainties when it comes to changes in extremes. So now Professor Krishna will carry forward with the rest of the talk. Over to you, sir.
Okay.
Can I stop?
Will you do you have the rest of the slides? Otherwise,
Yes.
I'll share mine. Yeah.
Yes, I have.
Okay. Okay. So so as Chaitra has shown, when we think of extreme rainfall events or unusually long periods of no rain, these are both naturally modulated as well as by our actions. And this is, we are talking just about the rainfall part of things. But then once the rainfall, the extreme rainfall hits us, what happens is a consequence not just of the rainfall, but also all of the built and the human systems that are at play here. And just within the last 1 month, I have 2 examples of 2 major floods with substantial losses of life. One in Libya, where Medicane storm Daniel hit and crossed into Libya and caused the rupture of 2 dams. And just last week here in Sikkim, we had a major hydro dam that was destroyed by a glacial lake outburst flood that reached and overwhelmed the dam. This also resulted in loss of life. So I think when we start thinking about what kinds of things affect human systems and human societies and add risk, our own infrastructure can add to those from the climate change itself. The additional rainfall, yes, can lead to flooding, but if that additional rainfall and the flooding can then unleash these kinds of stored reservoirs of water, and this is something that is not new, is not just in the last month. When we go back in time to 2015 floods in Chennai, or to the Kerala floods of 2018, a lot of it has to do with water management in reservoirs and dams that was not up to the mark. So these become very important when we have natural and human-caused changes in rainfall. So I will just briefly switch now to some other extremes that we've been working on, and this has to, Chaitra, next slide, please. So this is, we looked at floods that occurred in 2022 over large parts of Pakistan. Again, there was an increased extreme monsoon rainfall, but a lot of the flooding and the damage was because our own systems are vulnerable, the way we do construction and the places we do construction. So I think none of our risk assessments would be complete unless we take into consideration the kinds of infrastructure that we have, either to manage water or infrastructure that disregards incidents of flooding. So this is one recent paper. Next, please. So I'll switch gears now to looking at heat. This is again a major issue that, especially in the South Asian context, and this is a recent publication that was looking at how our risk of heat waves and severe heat waves is changing and is likely to change in the future. So if I'm looking at heat waves that are 3 days long or 5 days long or 7 days long, if you look at from left to right, you can see that the colors are getting darker, which essentially, in the way this figure is plotted, is telling us that compared to our current risk of such events, current frequency, the future is going to have 2, 5, 10, 20 times. The darker the color, the larger the number of times more frequent these kinds of events are going to be. So our longest heat wave events are going to be much more probable, whereas in our historical record, these events were very rare. From going into the future, these events are going to be much more probable. And the top row is when we reach 1.5 degrees centigrade temperature change globally, but the bottom row is when we reach 2 degrees. So you can see that there are darker colors in the lower row, indicating if we, heaven forbid, cross 2 degrees C, then all of these are going to be much, much more probable. And there are areas that are in purple, and these are new areas that do not currently see heat waves. I have never seen heat waves of that duration that are going to become prone to such long heat waves. And the longer the heat waves, we know it has effects on health, it has effects on agriculture and livestock and all of the things that matter to us. Last slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is just another look at this. We asked the question, in the past we've had some really large and lethal heat waves. We asked the question, what would those heat waves look like when we reach 1.5 degrees C or 2 degrees centigrade? And the overwhelming message that we got from models that we used was that the duration and the areal extent of such heat waves will most likely increase, and increase many-fold. And that's the message that we got. So this is a similar message to the extreme rainfall that we see in some places, or in some other places that we see for dryness. So there are multiple things that we have to be cognizant of. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Krishna ji, and actually both of you. Thank you so much for this presentation, and it's very clear, concise, but very worrisome where we are going. Extremely worrisome. We have Saiful Islam Saab with us. I am not been able to receive you, Saiful Saab. While we wait, can we request Saqib Bhai if you would kindly present the financial aspect of adaptation, that would be very useful.
Gee, thank you, Mir, sir. I hope I'm audible. Good afternoon and perhaps good evening to some of you as well. My name is Saqib Haq. I'm the Assistant Director at the International Center for Climate Change and Development, ICCAD for short. We're a research and capacity building center based in the Global South in Dhaka, Bangladesh, but we've worked across several of the LDCs and small island development states as well. And in terms of the activities that we've been seeing in the realm of climate finance, I'd like to highlight some of the challenges and trends that we've been seeing over the last several decades, and more pertinently over the last several COPs, where from the international climate finance realm, it's been highlighted over the last two COPs at COP26 and COP27, the significant shortage of climate funding that has been pledged and what has actually been delivered. So again, for the benefit of everybody, the traditional token number that was given was to be $100 billion per year for climate finance, which is a figure that most of the donors have not been able to meet, even from the year of 2020 onwards, for significant other real life challenges that have come across, namely the COVID and Ukraine war crisis. However, these are not unlike traditional lackings in climate finance that we've seen over the last 30 years of the COPs that we've been having the negotiations, significantly from climate polluters who have pledged larger and larger amounts every successive COP, but not really been able to deliver significantly on being able to tackle the activities that we've been having, which has led us to the realm of what we now term the era of loss and damage. For those of you that have heard the UN Secretary General mention, we're in the realm of climate boiling at the moment. We've just heard from several of our participants and presenters just now about the extreme heat waves, which are becoming much more prevalent, not just within the global south, but also within the global north, where significant wildfires have been happening across in North America as well as Europe, which were not the challenges that they were really prepared for. So these sorts of extreme events will require a lot of rethinking of the financial models that we've been traditionally working with in the realm of tackling climate finance. So I'd like to mention a couple of the trends that we've seen from the business as usual on climate finance, and what are some of the lessons that we're like to take forward going ahead from upcoming COP28, and what should be some of the areas that persons like myself really focus their research on in terms of how the funding principles need to be amended. So traditionally, what we've seen from the realm of climate finance is a prevalence of having larger mitigation projects receiving much more of the financial aid, whereas adaptation has received a significantly lower, even in areas where the funding mechanisms have made it a pledge in their own policies and regulations to have a higher number of projects funded under adaptation projects, such as the Green Climate Fund has a directive within their own guidelines about having 50-50 between mitigation projects and adaptation projects from the funding that they deliver. That has been a challenge that from their board meetings, where a large percentage, almost 80%, has gone for larger infrastructure mitigation projects rather than adaptation projects, which have received only about 20% by some estimates. As the Green Climate Fund is now currently in their new realm, new era of the replenishment for their funding, that is a significant challenge that we would like them to redress, looking into what are some of the practices that have led to such a drop within adaptation projects. And even within that 20%, a very small amount of that going for local communities. They tend to prefer more larger infrastructural adaptation projects for embankments and flood defenses and canals, whereas local communities and local organizations, even local government agencies, have traditionally received much less of the funding, being for capacity building and research, as well as planning and budgetary implementation, which has been some of the factors that have led to more successful adaptation initiatives. So over the last 20 years, we've seen several assessments and analyses done by research and think tanks that have shown that the legacy and the sustainability of adaptation projects really thrives with having local community involvement, local government involvement. And these are some lessons that we're hoping that in this new era of climate funding that are being replenished for not just the GCF, but for other UN agencies and sovereign donors as well. These are some of the lessons that they will be taking forward in understanding how best to address these adaptation initiatives, including the local communities and the local organizations from the planning stages. Traditionally, these have been activities where stakeholders have been included as sort of a dissemination partner. They've been sort of viewed as a end beneficiary to a project and only been sort of contacted for stakeholder meetings and dissemination activities at the latter stages of projects, almost when everything is designed, funding is about to be implemented, the sort of steamrollers and bulldozers are about to get onto the ground, and that's when the communities are involved. Whereas we've seen from several initiatives across the LDCs where these activities, including communities from the very beginning at the program planning stages, have led to more efficient funding because we're able to sort of target, understand the local context, and adaptation being a very context-specific activity, including local communities and local organizations, associations, as well as NGOs and charities that are on the ground in the climate vulnerable areas, have proven to be more beneficial in terms of the efficacy of the funding, as well as the legacy left behind once the donors have sort of backed out of their funding cycles. This is something that has been able to be incorporated into the local government activities, into local community planning, and has led to much more beneficial impacts. And so I'll end with some of the areas that we have been targeting in terms of the last few COPs, where we've seen in the prevalence of such extreme events that quite a lot of the realm of humanitarian aid and humanitarian sectors are now becoming climate era projects because of the prevalence of such extreme events and cyclones and flooding, that quite a lot of the traditionally humanitarian sector and disaster sector are now having to look into climate resiliency and climate adaptation as part of their strategies. And within that, traditionally humanitarian aid tends to be very, very short-lived and very, very projectized, often working in silos, working within from where the donors have set the funding from, whether it's from the water department within the sovereign donor or the agricultural unit within the development partners. And again, on the ground, what we've seen is that these are siloed approaches that really don't have much effect. For communities that are suffering from these impacts, from suffering from flooding, suffering from droughts, long-term activities, quite often a holistic approach is something that is much more effective in developing their resilience and developing their adaptive capacity. And those are some of the trends that we are hoping that in this new funding cycle, as most of the negotiations are looking at how to reform these funding principles, reform these funding activities, we're hoping that these are some of the lessons that we'll be able to put into the negotiations, put into the guidelines and the strategies for the development partners as they come forward. And I'll end with some of the work that we've been doing on an area what we call the principles of locally led adaptation. And the emphasis being on the second L of LLA, really enhancing the leadership of local entities, local governments, local associations, academics, in being able to be involved in the projects from the very beginning, as I mentioned. And so some of the work that we've been trying to do with several of these sovereign donors and development partners is really trying to use these principles of locally led adaptation to help them to understand how local communities can be better involved, how can they be better included, and really enhance the leadership by developing the capacity. Not to say that there is not capacity existing within these local communities already, but enhancing that capacity. How can we really give them the leadership to take forward the initiatives that they're working on that is affecting their own communities, and really put them in charge of the planning of the policies, planning of the projects, the design of these projects, the implementation, as well as monitoring and learning. How can we use these communities to be able to give us the insights that they have been taking, understanding their own context, and how we could design better projects and initiatives based on inclusivity of these local communities. And I think we've seen some of the good examples of how we can use various different methods, not just the usual sort of stakeholder meeting and workshop mentalities, but using more visual methods, using more photo stories and audio stories and videos in being able to include local communities so that they are able to inform these sorts of policies and projects going ahead and make funding a little bit more effective getting to the ground levels. So I'll end my remarks on that point, and I'm happy to share some of the links on the chat, and I'm happy to take any questions going forward. Thank you, Mirza.
Thank you, Saqib Ji. What you essentially have said is Apnar Pracheshta, your efforts, people's efforts, and finance follows that instead of leading or misleading or conflicting with people's effort of making local adaptations work. Thank you. We have questions, time available. We'll start with a question we already have, and other questions are welcome. There's a lot of material mentioned in the chat box, so please download it if it's useful for you. The question is from Kshitij Gupta and to Krishnaji and your team. And this is for India, but if you could kindly expand the question to South Asia to say what are the mitigation measures for heat waves that could be taken so that mortality, morbidity, livelihoods related challenges could be addressed. 1, 2, or 3 top-notch mitigation measures for heat wave. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Yes, this is, the purpose of doing this study was to look at whether we can say anything that is relevant to adaptation or policies that can be made in how we address future heat waves. So, the results are quite scary, admittedly, and I'm not sure that I have thought through all of the ways in which we can mitigate, but certainly in terms of the mortality and the morbidity, there are many heat action plans that are afoot in parts of India, and I know that there are efforts in Bangladesh in this direction. So I think that the scaling up of these action plans across geographies, across communities, is probably the best way to address the mortality and the morbidity part of things. Now, when it comes to livelihoods, things are a little more complicated. And I think we are starting to see, for example, the heat wave that occurred over India and Pakistan in 2022 resulted in a substantial loss of the wheat crop, estimates of up to 20%. Now, we are now entering territory where we don't have any precedent. A heat wave affecting people's health, killing people, yes, we have. But such large volumes of crop production lost to a heat wave is new territory as far as I understand it. So we still have to do a lot more work to understand what are the different ways in which such long and intense heat waves can affect us. I mean, there have been people with from certain states who have asked, what is it going to do to our school year if we are going to have to stop, prevent children from being exposed to this heat, and we close the schools. As these heat waves become 1, 2, 2.5 months long, can you afford to do that? Can you afford to keep them off the playgrounds? Can you afford to keep them out of school? So there are many imagined and unimagined consequences of these heat waves, and we need to do a lot more work in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely, we seem to know less and less about heat wave as we come up with some findings related to heat waves, because the heat waves are developing so rapidly and dynamically to do that. We would like to take questions, but luckily we have Saiful Saab with us. Welcome. And we thought we just lost you. Welcome very much. We have little time, but we do want to have you very much talk about water and flood extremes, especially with the Buett's experience. So would you have 5, maybe 7 minutes for your presentation? And then we'll go back to a small question answer session. And then Shilpi and I will sum up. Saiful Saab, please, welcome.
Sorry, I'm not presenting today because I thought I'll be talking. Sorry, in any way. I was listening to Dr. Rao and uh, about the heat wave and heat extremes in India and many parts of the world. But I'm focusing mostly on the recent extreme events, which is on the extreme precipitation and waterlogging, drainage, and flood in Bangladesh. And we have seen this year, if you're considering this year, all on a sudden, huge amount of rainfall, and that always happening in Bangladesh. But now recently, it changes its characteristics in terms of volume of rainfall, in terms of the duration of the rainfall. We see that huge rainfall last week, which is the October. As you know, our monsoon ends in September, but we are seeing that monsoon is coming, onset is delayed, and also withdrawal is delayed. That impact our agriculture, particularly in the Mymensingh region, when people are doing the fish farming, and it impacted, and it losses are huge, and thousands crore in our rupee, in our Bangladesh currency, BDT. So this impacted our life and livelihood. Many places was underwater for more than a day. And urban city, not only because of the global warming and induced rainfall, but also urban city is rapidly growing in Bangladesh. And many countries in India and developing countries, they are facing tremendous pressure of the people coming from all over the country to the cities. And by 2050, cities will be twice people than currently they have. So 2/3 of the people of the world will be living in the cities, and Dhaka is no exception. The problem is when too many people coming, the whole area become more and more urban, paved buildings, and then the water is not able to go down to the earth and down to the infiltration and to the soil. So the problem is if most of the precipitation that occur become runoff. On the other hand, there is a diminishing of water bodies. We have seen that in the 2000, Dhaka city about 22% water area, water bodies, lakes, reservoirs, now only 6%. So because the land is very, price is high, so people transferring land use from water bodies, lakes into buildings, supermarket, markets, so because the price is high. So in that circumstances, every city in Bangladesh going to be facing waterlogging and drainage problems. And on top of that, the variability of climate change, posing another kind of issues on that. So extreme rainfall all on a sudden and different time frames, and that impacts the urban areas of the country. And many cities are now underwater for many days. Last year, there was 3 days, Sylhet, Sunamganj, an unprecedented amount of rainfall we are observing. In 3 days, in Sylhet, Sunamganj region, in Cherrapunji, about 2.5 meter precipitation occurred in June last year. So this kind of phenomena is new to this area, and we are also facing the development, and that also impacted. On the other hand, Bangladesh has a very flat coast. As you know, we are in a delta, is a very flat delta. Our coastal area is about 1 to 5 meter elevation, and the sea is constantly, sea level is rising, and already 20 centimeter rise, and it's also experienced subsidence, huge subsidence. So relative sea level is higher than any other part of the world. Also, as you know, the in North Indian Ocean and Bengal is much warmer than other part of the ocean. So that creates a platform for the low pressure system to form or deep depression to form. And you see previously cyclone in the pre-monsoon and post-monsoon season. Currently, we are seeing cyclone occurring during monsoon. We call it monsoon depression because cyclone cannot form in monsoon, but depression form, and such depression with active monsoon create a lot of havoc to this area. And the coastal area is also suffering from salinity intrusion and other impact. On the other hand, building coastal area resilient, city resilient, increasing open space or increasing drainage capacity is another challenge. And we need this kind of development or sustainable and resilient infrastructure. We need support from countries which are one of the major pollutant and greenhouse gas, who is very much responsible for putting too much greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. We call it Annex 1 country. Unfortunately, we don't have seen much support from the developed countries who promises in the Paris Agreement that by 2020, there will be fund for 100 billion. Half of them will be go to mitigation, half of them to adaptation. But unfortunately, this is always promises is goes to by 2025 when they will put this amount of money. And then there is a question of whether extremely most vulnerable countries have access to the fund, because they have a lot of restrictions and many, I think, restrictions and many kinds of regulation that put release of the fund very difficult. And our country internally, they try to build our own resilience using our own resources. Government has putting some resources on Bangladesh Climate Trust and trying to build the resilient infrastructure like increasing height of the coastal embankment improving project CIP, and also making many different efforts like increasing water availability, water management, and also changing transport sector from cars to the railway. We are recently inaugurated the metro rail and other to reduce some greenhouse gases. So our effort is there, but we feel like the way world is moving in terms of greenhouse gas emission, we are not likely to limit it in 2 degrees, and that would be impacted the countries like us and also many South Asian countries facing many extremes. And even as Dr. Rao said that we are facing heat extremes, and how can we cope with that? Because its exposure is very high, population density is very high, and urbanization is increasing. So urban heat island we see in the area, and also it impacts the agriculture. So it's a lot of challenge, but I think from sharing the knowledge between the partners of around the world, South Asian countries, or from other parts of the world, we can build our nation more resilient. So I stop here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Saiful Saab. Thank you for your response, which was as content-wise presentation. So thanks for substantive response that you have. We are running short of time, and I was going to suggest we take one question, and then Shilpi and I would sum up this very sumptuous session. The one question we already have, it's from Kshitij Gupta to Saqib Bhai, and the question is about the funding gap between civil society organizations, what role they can play to make sure that funding gap between adaptation and mitigation measures, the discrepancy there could be addressed. Any concrete measures that you would suggest for South Asia civil society organizations? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Kshitij. So I would address it in two manners. So firstly, at the global, as I mentioned, looking at the sort of where the funding originates from, the UNFCCC, COP, or sovereign donorships, being able to be involved in the negotiations and being sort of at the forefront of the funding and rules and designs is really one of the ways that I would encourage for civil society networks to discuss what are the funding principles that need to be enhanced so that local communities and CSOs are really able to take adaptation initiatives forward. And I'm encouraged by looking at the number of CSOs that have sort of grown in attendance going into the COP. So from the very first COPs that I've been attending, the attendance for civil societies used to be in the low thousands, perhaps 2,000 to 3,000 civil society networks. And most of them would be negotiators from government or other sort of agencies peripheral to government and NGOs. And over the last few decades, really, and the last two COPs that we've seen, the civil society networks have really been in the tens of thousands. So the estimate from COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh of civil society networks, particularly of youth organizations and marginalized communities, have really grown. They've been about 15,000, 20,000 by some estimates, which is really one of the ways that it has really led to an enhancement of understanding local issues. Not saying that those are addressed entirely within the negotiations. There are still left in the side event realm, doing hubs and pavilion activities on the peripheries of the negotiations. And really that's one of the challenges that I would say at the global level of being able to go to the negotiators directly while the negotiations are happening, while negotiators are coming back home, engaging with them and talking to them about the civil society activities that are happening on adaptation from the global south. And again, one of these initiatives, such as the South Asia Regional Hub Week that we're doing here, as well as the Resilience Hub, which is physically held in the COP negotiations in COP26, 27, and upcoming COP28. Those would be areas that I would really enhance civil society networks to bring in their negotiators, their own party delegates, their own activities from the donors and sort of ministerial officials, at least at the global level. On the national level, what we've seen in terms of CSOs and community activities, many of you might have seen on the news over the Climate Action Summit that happened in New York, parallel to the UN General Assembly. There was many protests and civil society marches organized talking about how the funding principles need to be shifted, how adaptation needs to be addressed, how loss and damage needs to be addressed. Now, I understand that that might not be such a feasible thing in the global south in many contexts due to political realities. However, what is encouraging in the global south is looking at understanding how national adaptation plans have been drafted in many countries. Bangladesh, one of them, most recently completed their national adaptation plan, and then have taken steps to take it further by going and developing local adaptation plans of action. And this is something that was championed by the government of Nepal, where they really worked at the district level, developing local adaptation plans. And in many LDCs across the global south, they really encourage civil societies to work on local adaptation plans, municipal adaptation plans, district adaptation plans, whatever is the sensible body and agency that is available, in including these civil society networks and NGOs to really provide insights and inputs in these adaptation activities right now, and not to take them as a standalone plan that will sit there in perpetuity, but really something that should be reviewed and revised according to the activities and initiatives, and seeing the impact of adaptation initiatives and taking them forward from that. So again, I would encourage for civil society networks to really look into the national planning processes and national monitoring processes and provide evidence. And again, some of the research and evidence methods that we've seen from our presenters earlier, those are very good examples of how local communities and local academics can really provide insights and inputs into these national planning processes and get really involved in adaptation initiatives. And I'm happy to follow this through. I'll provide my email on the chat, but I'll hand back to you, Mir. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Saqib Bhai. It was very comprehensive response for civil society role in financing adaptation and mitigation both. So let us sum up now, and it's Shilpi, would you like to go first, and then I'll close. What we essentially should be doing is closing remarks and way ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Mir. We do have a question for Saiful. I don't know if we take it here or there is a question.
I didn't. Let's see.
May I quickly? May I quickly?
Quick response.
Quick response. One is, government take many initiative. One of them is recently prepared the National Adaptation Plan. You can see website of Ministry of Environment Forestry where all the plans are there. And in terms of implementation, they are gradually implementing phase by phase, not up to the pace because of many limitations As you know, we already recovering from COVID pandemic and many stages of the country going through. But one of the projects I like to mention is Coastal Embankment Improvement Project, where there are now 25 coastal holder is the embankment. They are raising. They're also increasing shelters, and afforestation is going on, and many other programs, including agriculture, improving livelihood and water consumption. And it's some part of actually ongoing development project. Some are, but they are focusing on more climate resilient and building climate resilient infrastructure and continue going so. But I mentioned that we need also and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That was useful, Rohit Bhai, for you. Shilpi, we really are out of time. It's 2 minutes and both of us have to sum up. So let's do it as best as we can.
Yeah, I will just take 30 seconds then, Mihir. And I think the thing that jumped out for me across all presentations is the question is, are we prepared for the unprecedented, which is waiting for us, and how much and to what extent are we prepared, and what kind of preparedness is required? And I wanted to go back to some of the issues that we raised in the presentation, and also Krishna touched upon it. And I think the whole point is about rethinking development. What kind of development are we doing in these locations across the globe? Infrastructure-led, top-down, tech-led, not involving local communities, which connects really well with Saqib's point about this binary between adaptation and mitigation, that even if, you know, there is finance out there, it's going a lot into some of these mitigation strategies and technologies, hidden methods, right? And we are seeing in Sikkim what those dams are doing. So I think there is this contradiction and contrast in our development strategies, and unless these strategies are locally informed by perspectives on the front line, local communities and stakeholders, I don't think we can prepare enough. So it's really about reversing the way of looking at development and what can, and that's where I'll end.
Thank you. Thank you. So that's the larger piece which Shilpi has concluded, and to look at way ahead. I just thought I'll give you a couple of more concrete adaptation related things that we could do way ahead. One is the lessons need to be learned around adaptation, because adaptation will happen in more complex and cascading risk scenario. So what is going to happen? And that's something we need to look at far more concretely than we have so far. Second, and that's something I take from, of course, Saiful Saab, your presentation, but also Shilpi's and Megha's. Second is transformative adaptation is still low. So we are not rethinking either adaptation or the development paradigm within which adaptation is taking place. And that was, of course, very clear, Megha, from your and Vinita's presentation, especially when you underline women's contribution, for example, concretely, and that's still not. Third, and I have one more, is we need to look at adaptation lessons from the point of view that adaptation does not cover future vulnerability and exposure. And of course, Krishnaji, you so well pointed it out, the area of ignorance, 20 times more frequent, longer, and severe possible heat waves. So obviously, future vulnerability of the vulnerability we know is not, we don't have lessons for that, or the new vulnerability which will pop up in the future. And the last, what we should look at more carefully in terms of lessons learned, is that vulnerables still do own most of adaptation. And that's the point, Saqib, I was making, that poor people are investing in adaptation. And if there is any way that investment can be multiplied or upscaled, wide scale, with civil society efforts and large efforts by other projects which come and either work against that or work in spite of that, if they could actually leverage this effort, small, local, that itself would help us move ahead much faster, better. So those are the 4 lessons we need to focus on in the coming years, not decades. We are running out of time. With that, I would very much like to thank ICAD and the Hub for this particular event. Thank you very much. Those of you want to put on your video, please do that so that this the shot could be taken. Navneeta, Yim Leng Shu, Humayun Kabir Saab, Manish Bhai, Vishnu, all of you if you wish. I also want to thank IDS for this particular effort and the project on the ground, which is so very interesting and so very at the intersection of so many of the questions that are being asked and lessons to be learned. And I thank the panel members, all of you, and the participants. Thank you very much.
So, is the shot taken? I don't know.
I hope, yes.
Okay, I'll also take it.
Please.
Yeah, I've taken one, so that's fine.
Thank you.
Back up. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.